This should go without saying, but nothing in this video should be construed as being anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. I believe that anti-Semitism is a ugly form of collectivism and tribalism that all rational people try to escape. But it is interesting that I have to make this disclaimer because our political conversation is now dictated and regulated not by the rules of reason, not by the principles of rationality or common sense, but instead by the sensibilities of people who couldn't care less about reason or common sense, which is one of the reasons why I believe America is in the state that it's in right now culturally. But we'll get to that in a second. So, the ADL, many of you see the title and may be wondering why, how. I shall explain. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, one of the most premier lobbying organizations that claims to go against anti-Semitism, has recently been in the news because they have condemned Elon Musk's bringing back, restoring the accounts of President Trump on Twitter and other people. And in a series of tweets, the ADL CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, basically said that Elon Musk is not willing to protect society or democracy from the voices of people who sow disinformation and misinformation. And he asked the question, this is the tweet that got a lot of people mad. He says, Elon Musk's decisions over the last month have been erratic and alarming, but this decision to bring back Donald Trump is dangerous and a threat to American democracy. We need to ask, is it time for Twitter to go? Now, shortly after this tweet, the ADL's official Twitter page for the organization made this tweet, which was even more concerning. Whatever happens to Twitter, new social platforms need to center trust and safety from the outset, or risk being subject to the same fate. In the meantime, Elon Musk has put Twitter on death watch. It didn't have to be this way. Well, now, my friends, I must say something very quickly before we go on. This kind of language is not the kind of language you would hope to see from organizations that claim to be civil society organizations like the ADL certainly does. And also, trust and safety is a euphemism for restricting speech. Whenever you hear the words trust and safety, understand it is a thought-terminating cliche that is meant to limit the amount of information that you have to make an informed decision on the social, political, moral issues of our day. You should not at all believe it. It is a euphemism. Now, the ADL is no stranger to political profiteering and marketeering. In fact, the ADL has ever since, even before Greenblatt became the CEO, but especially since he became the CEO, has engaged in several smear campaigns against people like, let's say, Brett Kavanaugh and others who may have conservative beliefs, but who are undoubtedly not anti-Semitic, and it has done so using its social gravitas. And so what I want to do in this video is actually examine how does the ADL and organizations like the ADL impact the social order. And by them impacting the social order, what does that say about what they truly stand for, their true nature? Now, my friends, there are three categories that I want all of you to memorize and analyze with me of people, of perceptions towards groups like the ADL. When I say groups like the ADL, I mean other groups that are advocacy groups for things like civil rights or so on and so forth, like the NAACP and the Southern Poverty Law Center. There are three categories. There are probably more than three categories, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to lump perspectives on these groups into three categories. A, there is the category of the person who approves of the ADL's job and what they do by means of association. That means they associate the ADL or groups like them with good things, with benevolent causes, and on that basis alone, they will support what the ADL does no matter what it is. Now, of course, this problem of association is a little bit deadly because what it does is it takes the eye off of what the group is actually doing and puts it on the idealized form, the sort of platonic form, if you will, of what the group, what you hope the group is, which can make you not understand what the group is actually doing. It is essentially a deep form of ignorance. Now, the problem of association has been common throughout human society. In fact, association has been a benefit for many human beings. Human beings, primitive man, for example, survived by means of association. Primitive man understood that if he were to go out into the wilderness and escape the fires of his village that his people had built in the settlement, he would die. This is why being excommunicated from a village so many years ago in the ancient times was actually a deadly thing because you were presumably out of luck with no resources. Also, Machiavelli said in The Prince, this is a very interesting point, he said in The Prince that imitation is something that a leader looks to. And imitation is a form of association because it associates good traits with great men who have done things. So association is one of the ways human beings reason. But when we use association to limit the amount of concepts we understand and limit our interaction with the truth, and we use it as an illusion, we don't actually get anywhere productive. We get to a place of ignorance. So there's those people. Then there is the second category. It's the people who are not tuned in to the political and social happenings of society and instead just have a cursory knowledge of things, and they may look at the ADL and say, okay, they sound good, and then move on. This is the sort of low information voter, if you will. Then you have the third person. And this is a nefarious kind of actor. This is a vile kind of actor. This is a kind of actor that unfortunately is one of the reasons why the ADL and groups like them are deceivers. And this is the person, this is the individual who doesn't care about what the ADL stands for or what they supposedly stands for, but instead this individual cares about how they can use the ADL, use the SPLC, use the NAACP, use these progressive groups, use Planned Parenthood towards their own personal ends. These are the people in the power structures of society that seek to use certain organizations as agents for their own cause. Now, amongst these three categories, as I mentioned before, I believe that the third category of people is where we really need to look to understand what the ADL really stands for. Now, my friends, the ADL, according to this third category, is instrumental in setting the narrative. What the ADL does is whenever there is an incidence of anti-Semitism or ostensible, apparent, but not substantial anti-Semitism, the ADL will come in and they'll create a narrative about the situation, and then they will propose their own solutions for that particular issue. Now, the ADL uses its narrative shaping capabilities and its position as a group supposedly fighting hate to shield nefarious activities. And the agents in the power structure, that is the mainstream media, which uncritically cites the ADL and groups like them as credible authority sources on the issues of hate and extremism without actually analyzing or examining their premises or their claims, it allows those people to go ahead and also assume the reins of narrative control by and through groups like the ADL. This is what is called manufactured consent. People think that Chomsky came up with this idea. That's not the case. Long before Chomsky came up with this idea, there was a book called Public Opinion, which basically said the following. And in the book, it said that manufacturing consent is actually healthy for a flourishing democracy. Why is this so? Well, according to the author of that book, because people relying on moral conscience or their own personal convictions is not enough for a society where there is something more than what you believe, something more than your conscience. So essentially, this idea of manufacturing consent, where the media will quite literally create a narrative about something and try to direct public opinion towards a particular end, even if that end is a bad end, even if they're doing so in a manipulative way, is justified on the basis of defending democracy or some other political cause. I don't care who is doing the manufactured consent, but what we have to understand is that there are particular actors in this case who actively do it and who seek to propagandize you. My friends, the government has been manufacturing consent for decades. The FBI did it against MLK and several feminist and black supremacist movements during the 60s, where they would go in, they would do back blag operations, where they would basically infiltrate organizations, get details about them, and then try to create narratives or create scandals, false scandals, or plant evidence so they could take down people they didn't like. I mean, the FBI quite literally wrote a letter to Dr. King encouraging him to kill himself because he was seen as a disruptor to the current social order. And regardless of what you think of Dr. King, one thing is clear. The government has been doing manufactured consent for a very long time. This is on record. And so has the media. Now, my friends, the truth is very simple. Organizations like the ADL, like the NAACP and the SPLC, have become hijacked by political actors, and they are tools of those in power who wish to direct the discourse in a certain direction. Think of the ADL's attack on free speech on Twitter as a good example of this, or the repeated use of the term hate speech as an even better example of this. So, for example, the ADL said that Donald Trump cannot come back on Twitter or shouldn't come back on Twitter, and tried to get advertisers to pull the plug on Twitter for allowing Donald Trump because he's an insurrectionist or whatever and he foments violence or what have you. Well, here's the thing about that. Not only are those charges untrue, but if we lived in the world the ADL wants us to live in, we wouldn't have a way to decide if those charges are true or not, because expression would be restricted to a realm of acceptability. Acceptability created by manufactured consent with a conspiracy between the media and these groups is what the ultimate goal appears to be here, and that is what they're pushing for. If you don't believe me, if you think I'm crazy, then why does the ADL push for hate speech laws? Why does the ADL constantly use the term hate speech to justify trying to censor free speech? These organizations, my friends, like the SPLC, which has been the media's darling for many decades, which has slandered people like various conservative voices, whether it be Michelle Bachmann, whether it be the Family Research Council, who, by the way, people that I vociferously disagree with on several different social issues, but have slandered them as extremists. They slandered Cliven Bundy, the Nevada rancher, as an anti-government extremist. They have literally created different categories of extremism, and the media has taken these categories and transmitted these categories uncritically by and through their information avenues, basically convincing the masses that the SPLC is this unimpeachable voice for truth, and they should be taken seriously because they have institutional credibility. However, even the DOJ, the Obama DOJ, reprimanded an SPLC attorney for being a practitioner of subterfuge and being deceitful. These organizations, the NAACP, it stood for a society in which Jim Crow and the social order of Jim Crow would no longer be shackles onto Black Americans, and now it is actively advocating for ideologies, for collectivist ideologies, uncritically, and presumably in the name of still doing that. How do I know this? Because the NAACP president has no conception of nuance at all, because he, when Donald Trump was let back on Twitter, immediately condemned the action and said something quite vicious. And actually, I'll read what he said. He said, "In Elon Musk's Twitter sphere, you can incite an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, which led to the deaths of multiple people, and still be allowed to spew hate and violent conspiracies on his platform. Any advertiser still funding Twitter should immediately pause all advertising. If Elon Musk continues to run Twitter like this, using garbage polls that do not represent the American people and the needs of our democracy, God help us all." So in that statement, there are several things that are presumed that are demonstrably false. Number one, the idea that America is a democracy. It is not. Number two, the idea that a private actor is bound to advance any political narrative goes against the entire conception of the American experiment, which was an attempt to separate the government in its excesses from interfering on the private individual. There are so many more errors with this statement made by the president of the NAACP, and yet he and his friends use their institutional power and credibility to try to manipulate the discourse and infuse their own political biases into what are supposed to be benevolent missions. It's supposed to be benevolent to fight anti-Semitism. It's supposed to be benevolent to fight segregation. But instead of actually continuing to do those things in ways that are as wide and universal as possible, these political actors default to their premises and go after their political enemies as opposed to going after people who they were originally supposed to go after. That is what has happened with these organizations, my friend. That is what they have become in our current society, which is why I said in a tweet that Yoram Hazony, again, someone who I don't agree with very much, but who also agrees with me on this issue about the ADL, retweeted. I said these organizations are not civil society organizations. These organizations are not civil whatsoever, and they hate society. They absolutely despise society. Society, my friends, has prerequisites that are rooted in reality. Things that the philosopher Thomas Reid said are common sense principles, insofar as if you get rid of these basic rules and principles, what you do is you don't have a coherent thought anymore. If you ask yourself, for example, do I really exist? You cannot engage with existence because what you're doing is you're thinking about the idea of existence. We presume we exist so we can actually analyze issues that happen in our existence. But instead of trying to understand these basic prerequisites, these organizations go against it. One of the prerequisites of a free society, of any society really, is free speech. Expression is the vehicle by which we differentiate concepts and by which we understand our fellow man. If man cannot differentiate concepts, understand concepts, and appreciate them, his potential to grow is limited because human beings grow, or they can grow, upon receipt of knowledge. This is why education is a big emphasis in many societies. Imagine if man remained ignorant for his whole life. He would have never gone from the caves to the stars in a few thousand years, something that no other species on this planet had the ability to do in those same years, because man is endowed with the faculty of rationality, and from that faculty flows his ability to express himself, to understand and reckon with the world around him. But these organizations, through their dubious labels, their anti-conceptual labels, their anti-philosophical labels of hate speech, and all these other things which restrict human expression to this narrow realm of accessibility, through these organizations, my friends, man becomes a weak creature, and society is under a tyranny. If man can't express himself, he can't have society. If man is not recognized as an individual, he can't have society. And these groups, like the ADL, want to reshape society in their own image. They are what we would call Gnostics, what Eric Voegelin, one of the brilliant philosophers of the past century, would call Gnostics, ignoring established laws, traditions, customs, mores, and trying to shift them. With help from the media, of course. What's the scam? The scam is, my friends, groups like the ADL claim they fight anti-Semitism. The NAACP claims they help black folks. The SPLC claims they fight bigotry and hatred. But what they actually do is assault the fundamental principles of society, and they seek to restrict human freedom by way of putting binds on human expression, which restricts the amount of information man has, therefore also restricting his growth as a human being, and then something that does not grow ultimately dies. And they act as a sword for the people in the power structure, such as the corporate media, which uncritically cites these organizations and uses them to their own ends. That is the scam. They act as if they are benevolent, but in all reality, they are merely pawns on a chessboard. They are a loaded gun in the hands of any political actor, such as Greenblatt, who is a former Obama operative, by the way, who is clearly not someone who can keep to a benevolent universal mission because he is a partisan himself. These organizations are simply guns in the hands of the people who happen to be holding them at any given time. They are not civil, and they do not like society. These are organizations that you should be careful of, be wary of. You can adulate their former goals. You can say, well, it's great that you wanted to fight anti-Semitism or whatever, but you can also say, as many Jewish conservatives have said over the past, as of the posting of this video, 48 hours, that it's time to go forth and get a new warrior, get a new institution to represent these universal values, as opposed to continuing to cater to these glorified propaganda outfits, which are reinforced, perpetuated via manufacturing consent by even more glorified yet dying propaganda outfits, and that is the corporate mainstream media. My friends, I love you guys so much. If you love me, please sure to go to my Patreon and subscribe there. Please sure to subscribe to the channel. Like this video, share this video, comment on this video. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. You have a good one. Bye-bye.